Hi, I'm Jason Gorber from ThatShelf.com, and we're here to talk about the Who Sell Out.
Big change.
Now, for everybody who's a Who fan, this is no surprise, but for those of you that sort of know a little bit of Tommy, a little bit of Pinball Wizard, maybe something from Who's Next, maybe a little bit from Quadrophenia, you might be surprised to know that the Who's potentially greatest record, I'm going there, is the Who Sell Out. Now, this is a remarkable record. First of all, just a little bit of history about it. When this was released, it really was meant to be nostalgic, as crazy as it was. Think of this as nostalgic for the 1960s in the 1960s. And it took a lot of what Pete Townsend and his sort of art school background, and along with the sort of goons that were in the Who, to another level. Really, it's a concept album, obviously prior to Tommy, but what its concept is essentially to recreate the sounds of what then was no longer sort of in play, which is Radio Luxembourg. Now, I don't pretend to be a complete expert on Radio Luxembourg, but the short version is this. The BBC in England completely controlled the airwaves. Your licensing fee, eventually your television fee, would go to the national broadcaster. The national broadcaster was limited because of union rules about how much pre-recorded music you could play. So there was a ton of American rock and roll and soul, gospel, whatever, or even local music that was recorded that was not played. Instead, they had a bunch of studio orchestras that would do. So it'd be like sort of these old white dudes doing a bunch of stuff that may be a hint of their kind of craziness that was taking place on the Ed Sullivan Show or something like that. I believe it's something like 20 or 22 hours a week that you were allowed to actually have any recorded music, whether it's Beethoven or eventually the Beatles. And because of that, it meant that teenagers, the ones who were actually consuming all this stuff, young kids, needed to have different outlets. Now remember, this is post-war England. The economy was getting obviously a little bit better, but these were kids whose parents definitely were used to absolute rationing, growing up as a post-war ennui, the loss of the emperor, all of this crazy stuff. You could go on and on and on about the sort of the fertile ground on which all these 1960s bands came out of. A very particular time in the history of Great Britain. Out of that came this Radio Luxembourg, which was essentially an offshore, think of it as like just parking your boat in international waters and blasting music at an unsuspecting world. Well, you can do that with radio, of course. And they would do stuff. They would actually record in London. They would have a bunch of London DJs and put them on tape and then go to Radio Luxembourg and then broadcast it back to England, getting around the BBC's incredible restrictions. And you would have all these interspersed sort of sound. Anybody, again, who's used to radio, grew up in the 70s and the 80s, you would hear these sort of radio announcements. Anybody who's seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood will hear a bunch of that. I guess it's KTLA or whatever it is. KCRW is the new one now, but whatever the station that all the AM stuff came Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, you'll get these sort of DJs like coming up on Thursday, like this kind of weird jingly nonsense that you would actually get. So the Who took that, plus the growing consumerism, the use of advertising. Remember, BBC non-commercial radio, but stuff was becoming more and more where you would get magazine ads and stuff like that, and sarcastically, sardonically, whichever way you want to look at it, do an album that essentially poked fun at consumerism and absolutely gave sort of homage to this particular era of media in England. This is our first Canadian pressing on Decca, lithoed in Canada. It's actually you can see the old Decca label on this. The one song that most people know from this record is I Can See for Miles, which again is pretty fascinating where it sort of kicks in here. It's absolutely sort of that burgeoning psychedelic, almost proggy, pre-prog certainly song, really fantastic, but it sort of slips in the middle of, again, this varied music program. It's like listening to this record is like sitting down and listening to the weirdest radio show you've ever heard. You have full-on commercials for everything from Coke to Heinz Beans to acne medicine. You have songs dedicated to antiperspirant. And then you have something like I Can See for Miles, this sort of weird and wild psychedelic classic, frankly. I only knew it sort of as a single, but to listen to this record as a record is what really gives it its energy and its joy. They did, there's a digital release from not that long ago. This is that they did, I never picked up. But this monster, for those that are aware, that's a Coax SVP. This is the 200-gram classic albums version on stereo with a psychedelic poster included. So immediately you can see the Step 1 Classic actually released, those that actually know the 90s, came out on 200-gram record. This nice, beautiful, heavy record. Instead of being on Decca, aka the Canadian or American label, they replicated perfectly the track records. Beautiful 200-gram, little bit of fun from Classic. Cost me a small fortune. This hypothetically is as good of an analog version as I'm going to get, but you know, we'll see how it all plays out. Just to show the original, the replication of the original poster that you got. This is what came in the Classics. Whichever way you want to look at it. Obviously the writing goes that way and the image is upside down. The Who sellout. Obviously to be hung this way. So this totally wild thing, frameable poster, because why not? The original. A record about this record, I have loved for a long time, and I'm a big fan of her. We banter sometimes on Twitter, which is one of the small joys of my life. Daughter of Charlie Hayden, excuse me. The inevitable of Petra Hayden. Now the story of Petra Hayden doing the Who sellout, apparently a friend of her kind of dared her to do it. I think that's the story. She can obviously correct what's going on. But what she did was essentially got a multi-track, I guess, cassette recorder. I don't know if it was one of the 4 tracks, 8 tracks, whatever it was. Back in the day, it's not super high fidelity. Doesn't matter. This is basically her doing this somewhere between Bobby McFerrin and the Persuasions and just her awesomeness. This kind of amazing a cappella version of all the songs in Who Sell Out. If you've not had a chance to actually listen, if you're a fan of this record and you've not listened to this, this is amazing. This is like such a beautiful tribute to this record. You can feel sort of her hesitation a little bit, but also her deep sort of commitment to it all. And if you love this record, you really, I think, owe it to yourself to actually dig into this. It's really a lot of fun. And actually, she's done such close listening to a bunch of the instrumentations that in some ways it will actually make you appreciate the original album more, because as she dives into it, you'll actually hear stuff that you didn't necessarily hear. All of this, as I said, is that the Who themselves have now been releasing a new box set dedicated to Who Sell Out. They've done a bunch of these. Again, because I'm a lunatic, they did both a vinyl release and a digital release. I'll be showing you both. But for now, just to keep it simple, let's look at what just arrived straight from thewho.com on limited edition vinyl. Their new version of the Who Sell Out. Nice sticker on the front. 2 LP Mono Deluxe Remastered Edition pressed on heavyweight colored vinyl. The original album on Odorono red vinyl. LP2 has 13 bonus tracks on baked bean orange vinyl, rare foes memorabilia, a free psychedelic poster. I think we're going to know what that looks like. And a track-by-track liner notes. And to a beautiful quote from Pete. Quote, "We were hoping to get free Jaguars. We got 50 tins of free baked beans." In other words, they did all these commercials, and what they ended up were a whole bunch of baked beans, and they didn't end up with the free cars, unfortunately, as much as they would like. As I open this up carefully, you will see this is now going to be a gatefold, because it's now a 2-record set. So the mono mix of this, again, there's a whole nother conversation about stereo or mono. I actually prefer the stereo for this. This is not always the case, especially for towards the end of the 1960s. A bunch of mixing for people like the Beatles, where mono actually remains in many ways definitive. Nonetheless, I am very much looking forward to having the differing version. You can see on the inside of the gatefold some really lovely photographs. The Heinz 57 thing, not quite Heinz 57, just normal non-sets, the radio keys. So we have on side one, as expected, Armenius in Sky, Heinz Baked Beans, Mariano, Toronto Tattoo, Our Love Was, I Can See for Miles. Yeah, if you've only ever heard I Can See for Miles, to hear Our Love Was sort of segue into it is just so amazing. And it's like one of those things when you get actually movie soundtracks or particularly musicals and you take the song out of the context of the whole, it doesn't quite have the power. This is very much an assembled record, which I love. I Can't Reach You, love that song. The Medic, Relax, South Stingy, super weird song. Sunrise, again, one of the more beautiful things that Pete ever wrote. Totally buried. Never plays on radio, but just a gorgeous, gorgeous song. And then Real 1 and 2. So Real 1 and 2, which closes out this record, really is the precursor to Tommy. There's actually absolute musical elements that are drawn from this and into Tommy. So anybody that thinks of it as the sort of pre-Tommy, in many ways, as I've gotten older, as much as I love Tommy, this may be Quadrophenia is still my favorite record, and I love Who's Next. I think I love this more than I love the original album version of Tommy. My actual go-to for Tommy, believe it or not, is the movie soundtrack. I think it's spectacular. I love the orchestral soundtrack. I love so much the songs in Tommy. The live at Woodstock is sublime. The live at Leeds, there's such incredible versions of Tommy that the album version of Tommy lacks a little bit of punch. But because this is a work of production, something like Sgt. Pepper Lonely Hearts Club Band, where the segues play, the live version is not the definitive version of this, or the other versions, the iterations is not the definitive version. This is it. On the second track, we have like a bunch of jingles that haven't been used, etc. Again, the original mixes of Jaguar and stuff like that, and so on. Inside, we got liner notes, nice little essay, and as discussed, we got it on, let's do this without ruining anything, on lovely colored vinyl. Track on one side, the beans on the other. Does it look reasonably flat? It looks reasonably flat. Already some dust on it. I like when they provide us this. I really wish they would have put this in, other sleeves, but I will deal with that in a moment. Thanks to my, again, trusty degrader. And then if I look at the other exclusive second discs, again, some really nice liner notes about the specific tracks. And a fantastic shade of orange track on one side and the leopard print on the other. So that's what one gets from the sort of vinyl set. This was a limited edition set only available at who.com. I believe they did a black version for regular release, but I'm a moron and wanted to have the colored vinyl for this. Now, for those of you who collect vinyl, you're well aware that back in the day, colored vinyl was kind of terrible. But it has gotten significantly better, and in terms of the quality and the caliber, look, this is going to be from digital sources anyway. But from my understanding, from everything that I've read and seen, contemporary colored vinyl is actually the equal of, and sometimes superior to sort of run-of-the-mill black vinyl. So, that's something for me to look at. Now, that's sort of a taste of what's involved in the deluxe edition. And I wasn't going to buy the sort of full version, but, I'm a moron. What can I say? You just got sucked into the stuff, and I love this album so much that I really wanted to dive in. I wish they did a surround mix of this. There's actually a beautiful 5.1 mix of Tommy that did a really fantastic version. If I'm listening to digital often, I will prefer the sort of surround experience for stuff like Elton John, the Beatles, even Miles Davis. There's some world-class, phenomenal surround mixes that, frankly, I think more people are listening to these records on really decent vinyl playback many, many, many more than I've ever had the experience of actually seeing showcase digital multi-channel mixes, which is a real shame because for so many of these bands, these surround mixes are fantastic, be it a quad mix from Chicago or the stuff that Steve Hoffman does with people like Jethro Tull or even Marillion. Steve Wilson. Did I say Steve Hoffman? No, Steve Wilson. Point is, you can see where I'm going with this. The point is that when we're actually dealing with CDs, I tend to not listen to a lot of CD. I listen to FLAC on my FIO player. You can actually check out that video if you would like in our channel. But nonetheless, to have the set, to have the essays, to have the book, this is something that I actually am somebody who will actually dive into. So this, thank you, Universal Music, is the big beast as I open this up. And inside this outer box, we have, as promised, the Who Sell Out box set. Once again on the front, with the same, we are hoping to get free Jaguars. Disc 1 is the original mono album plus bonus track. So basically what I had with the first 2 records. Disc 2 is the original stereo album plus bonus tracks. Again, I believe the same bonus tracks on both. Just one is the mono mix, one is the stereo mix. And these should, by any rights, be dedicated mono mixes, not just fold downs. Obviously, I got a button on my phono preamp that I can actually press and turn anything from stereo to mono. But these would actually be from the master tapes mixed to mono. And again, there's a subject for an entirely different movie. Disc 3, unreleased outtakes, alternate versions, and studio chat. I really sucker for that stuff. Disc 4, The Road to Tommy, tracks recorded in 1968. So this is even more pre-Tommy stuff, which I'm super, super excited to actually dive into. Disc 5, 14 of Pete Townshend's original demos previously unreleased. Now, every Who fan knows this. For those that don't, there are records called Scoop. There's a bunch of them. Pete Townshend, more than almost anybody in recorded music, particularly of this era, had demos that shamed most bands. Period. The demos of Pete Townshend are so extraordinary that they are some of the greatest recordings ever made in the 1960s, and then he would then give them to the Who and they make some of the greatest recordings of all time. So these are not some sort of like slapdash, haphazard sort of construction. They're incredible. In fact, one of the most famous Who tracks of all time, Bubba O'Reilly, the actual synth part is basically Pete's demo. That the Who's playing atop the actual, they didn't re-replicate the actual arpeggiated element. They just used his demo. Now, there are many records that the demos themselves have become the sort of definitive versions. Nebraska by Springsteen comes to mind. But nonetheless, Pete's demos are truly, truly remarkable. And the fact that we're still finding more of them after all these years is fantastic. I guess he did a lot of music. But I'm super, super excited to dive into that. And disc 6, we get a 7-inch single, I Can See for Miles, in picture sleeve. And disc 7 is a 7-inch single of Magic Bus in a picture sleeve. Again, more stuff in and around the era. All tracks remastered, 80-page color book with rare photos and memorabilia. Brand new notes by Pete Townshend. He's a hell of a writer. It's so depressing how good he is about almost everything. And then new essays and track-by-track annotation, which will be not dissimilar to what we actually saw in the vinyl. So as I carefully cut this open, keeping the outer plastic because I am that person. Do this as carefully as I can. We are going to see what's inside. So first things first, we have the super deluxe version of the Who Sellout. Inside this, we have, as they usually do, sort of envelopes with the discs in the front and the back. Boom. And then we have just a series of really wonderful photos, essays, original vintage ads, track-by-track breakdown, all here in a really nice hardcover book. I mean, for this alone, I think it's in many ways worth the purchase price. They've done a really good job. But they've done this for Quadrophenia. They've done this for Tommy. Again, those came with surround mixes, but that's a whole nother story. Then inside here, we get the inevitable tchotchkes, because that's what it had. Big news from Big L. Be there. Big L discotheque. Again, more as the Who sellout. And inside here, more great artwork as I'm dropping everything. Inside here. And inside, we got a couple old school 45 spiders. Honorary members. Basically an old school newsletter showing a bunch of tours. Vancouver, Canada on March 1st. Did they make it to Toronto? They didn't. But yeah, 3 nights at the Fillmore Auditorium in San Francisco. That would be a hell of it. Sundays at the Seville. With a bunch of Who artwork here. Sundays at Seville, 29th of October. Return from the USA, Cream, the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band, and the Action. The 19th of November, the Bee Gees show, concert every Sunday. And this is obviously the program that you actually got when you saw The Who. Studio 6, the Vanilla Fudge, then an interval, then The Who. Sunday, 22nd of October, 1967. A NEMS presentation. Anybody knows NEMS? That is obviously the Epstein organization. Wonderful Radio London Big L Club 266. So again, back to the Radio Luxembourg stuff. A sticker that I can affix somewhere. Doubt I will do it. Oh, this is great. Old school headshots of The Who from the era. Again, do I need any of this? Absolutely not. It's completely nonsensical. Bag of Nails Club. So one of those sort of club entrance cards. Again, speakeasy card. What does it have in here? Speakeasy name, Keith Moon. So with his signature. So this is obviously his membership card. Card expires 11/2/1968. Oh, that's wild. So another bill. From America, the Fabulous Temptations. That's on Monday the 20th. On the 27th, Jimmy James and the Vagabonds. On December 4th, from America's West Coast, the Electric Prunes. On December 11th, it's Amen Corner, featuring Andy Fairweather Lowe. You're welcome to dig into about how many bloody bands that dude was in. And then on Monday, December 18th, the Fabulous Xmas Party with The Who. Brian K. Jones. Prizes galore. The Who playing. Another, this poster looks pretty wild. A British quad. City Hall, Newcastle. The Who, Traffic, The Herd. What else we got here? The Marmalade, Compere Cameron, and the Tremolos. Special guest star, the Tremolos. Tickets, 1216, book at Cooks Limited. Totally wild. Old school reproductions. That same psych poster that we had in the other one. This bad guy. And then, as promised, the picture discs. Look at that cover of I Can See for Miles. With Someone's Coming on the back, the UK single mix. The record itself. On track 45. And the Magic Bus, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde single. Again, Magic Bus around the same era, not included on this original version of the album. That was the whole thing, that you would actually get 45s that were an album track, because they figured if you bought this and the album's supposed to be different. It's a whole weird British thing. I actually really liked it when albums actually had, so you just have one thing to buy. But that's a whole nother thing. Then you get Happy Jack and you get the Magic Bus album in the States. It gets very confusing. But nonetheless, here, including in this, is the Magic Bus mix, along with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the original mono. So there you have it. Total sellout. Can you think of a more fitting album where it is all about merchandising and more nonsense and more trinkets and things to actually sort of celebrate blatant consumerism, that somehow I guess I'm spending money on a 5th boat or a 9th mansion or whatever the hell Pete and Roger and the family of Keith and John need. I have no idea. I don't really care. This is truly one of the great albums of all time. And I'm looking forward very much to diving into this. The Who, look, I love a lot of records, but a lot of bands, but in many ways, on many levels, The Who may be my favorite band, certainly of that era. As much as I love the Beatles, as much as I love the Rolling Stones, as much as I love Dylan, I love the way I love some of these records is as deep as anything in terms of my love of music. So I'm a huge fan. I'm ecstatic that they've actually spent the time and energy on doing this, and I cannot wait to dig in. For thatshelf.com, I'm Jason Gorber. Thanks so much for watching. Please like, please subscribe, please let us know in the comments what you think. Let us know what you think of this record, and we'll see you next video. Thanks so much. Take care.